phone, it says it's 6 o'clock, and so I'd like to call this Board of Trustees work study meeting at Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board of Trustees to order. For the record, the board members present are Tara Kovacik, Kim Brady, Marjorie Barnes, Karen Benavides, Ileana Garza Rojas, and I'm Randy Chapman. Sandra Hatfield is on a work assignment in Washington, D.C. tonight. I accused her of going back there to close down the Department of Education, but she knew that's not it. She did send a message saying she'll be thinking about it. She looks forward to watching the video after. We do constitute a quorum and may conduct business on behalf of the district. The first item on our agenda for tonight is audience for guests. Because this is a work study, audience for guests is limited to only items that are on this specific agenda. And it's my understanding that no one chose or wanted to speak as a result of that. So we'll skip past audience for guests and move directly into our work study discussion items. First is item 3A, the multilingual art. We've heard a lot about this. We're anxious to hear more, which I know you miss one.
I am going to introduce Ms. Carolyn Thomas. She is our person who came in and did our audit for the multilingual program. And she has a presentation that she'll be going through this evening. So I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
All right, I hope you don't mind if I stand up. I don't present well by sitting down. So hi everybody, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here in Carrollton-Farmers branch, and I really enjoy doing this kind of work. I just was mentioning how important this type of work is, to have someone coming from the outside, looking in and seeing ways that we can improve, and especially for our emergent bilingual student population. So real quickly, I am going to just introduce myself so that you know a little bit more about this random lady standing in front of you. So my name is Carlene Thomas. I do go by Carly. So if you need to kind of tell me the real deal, just be like, look, Carly, okay, and I'll know you're like being serious, all right? But a little bit about me. I started my educational career teaching in Beijing, China, at a university there, and I think it's kind of where my love for second language learners began. I came back to the States and scoodled Dallas skyline. You know, when I'm presenting in Houston area, I get boozed during this time, but anyways, no, I'm just kidding. Not really. But yeah, I came back, I was teaching right here in Dallas ISD, right around the corner. I was an elementary ed major, but I got out there and I was like, yeah, older kids, okay? And so I stuck with that for a long time, but spent time working in the Dallas area before working as an ESL migrant consultant in Region 10. And then got really crazy, decided to move my family to Austin and work at TEA. And I was the state's ESL program coordinator for 5 years, building statewide resources and materials, building our program implementation rubrics that we use across the state. And then just about a little over 2 years ago is when I launched my business to be able to work directly with school districts and other state agencies and regional centers to support more directly and say whatever I want to. Okay, anyway, and so I also get to increase my advocacy. I work on staff with the National Association for Bilingual Education, helping to support their international conferences, which is also next week in Atlanta. So if I have bags under my eyes, that's what I've been preparing for. I'm on the board for the National Association for English Learner Program Administrators. We do national advocacy, working with the Office of English Language Acquisition at the U.S. Department of Education to really communicate to states what's going on at the federal level. And I'm on the leadership team for the National Newcomer Network, which is a cohort, a coalition that has launched a national policy platform to increase supports for recently arrived students and their families. And so, bringing it closer to home, just want to leave you with one additional thing. These are my two kiddos. This is my daughter, Anaya. She's in 6th grade, and my son, Kian, who's in 3rd grade. Now, I don't just bring them up because I think they're cute, because they're my kids. But I also bring them up because it's related to this work that I do. They have both been participating in dual language programs there in Austin ISD since kindergarten. My daughter is still continuing in dual language in middle school. And so watching their bilingual trajectories has also given me that other perspective that I'm so thankful to have. I think with all of my experiences over the years, I'm just very thankful for having multiple perspectives, and being able to see really the educational system and our programs for English learners across a lot of different perspectives. So now getting into a little bit, what have I been up to? Well, we went through an evaluation process, and some of the things that I did was interview staff. Okay, some of those were virtual. About 20 of those interviews were done virtually, interviewing teachers, administrators, etc. And I'll show you those details here in a moment. Came on site to walk through Stark Elementary, Polk Middle School, and Newman Smith High School. See, just walk through and really feel and see those programs in implementation, and do a few additional staff interviews there as well. Also, I reviewed the multilingual department's procedures and some of their documentation, which they have extensive amounts of documentation and procedures, so able to look through those. And then, of course, conducting some data analysis directly from data provided by the district with STAR and TELPAS scores. And I'll get into that in just here in a minute. So I'm really going to talk mostly about the staff interviews and the data before I then get into my overall recommendations. So I did, as you can see here, the majority of the folks that I interviewed were our teachers, and then, of course, principals, EL specialists, and district specialists, and, of course, any of those district specialists and ESL specialists. So that's really what you kind of see that breakdown evenly there, who I was interviewing, really to get that wide pulse of across grade levels, across programs, to see how our programs are functioning across dual language, bilingual, and ESL. Okay? Now, what was I asking them? It was really in 3 buckets. I asked every interviewee, I asked them all the exact same questions, and most of those questions were on a quantifiable scale so that I could really be able to pinpoint key data points and see how they correlated more than just anecdotal data. So I looked at the multilingual department's impact. A lot of the reason that I do this is so that when I'm interviewing folks, they know that the multilingual department is being introspective as well, and we're not just trying to scrutinize their work, but also the work of the department. So it helps to also ease the worry sometimes of interviewees of why they're being interviewed, showing that growth mindset by the department. So I'm looking for, what's the communication like coming from the multilingual department? What is the stakeholder involvement and capacity? And principal and teacher support, as in how do they feel supported by the multilingual department? Then the next category for my staff interviews was program model implementation. This is where I find out from them the communication of the program model design, right? Whether it's parents, teachers, campus administrators, what do we know and understand? What's being communicated about the program model design? Do we understand it holistically? What is the clear and consistent implementation, right? What does that look like? If you were to describe it, do you know what it is? If you're teaching in a dual language program, do you know how to describe what your model is, or an ESL program? And what is newcomer support was another key area that I asked about to see how do we feel like that's going. Finally, the last bucket was on training, where I talked about what kind of training opportunities that they feel that they have, as well as follow up on the implementation for that training, and what kind of targeted training do they receive specifically, again, regarding newcomers, which tends to be a strain point for a lot of our teachers across the state, let alone across the U.S., of making sure that we're supporting especially kiddos who are at early stages of English proficiency. So as you can see, these are just overall the types of questions that I was looking for, which helped me to formulate those common trends of what I'm seeing in program implementation and design that feeds then into my evaluation. So I want to briefly go through the data, and I know I'm talking very fast because I really want to kind of get through this information so I can have time to share with you my recommendations. So I apologize if I'm going so quickly. But I do want to talk through the data analysis a little bit. I know this is small, but also keep in mind at the end, I'll share a QR that you can have the full evaluation report to be able to pull up to look at on your own. But these are just the general TELPAS trends. And of course, TELPAS evaluates listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And you can see that by the 4 colors and across 3 years. I looked at 3 years of data. Now, As you can see overall, our listening and our reading, so those are our receptive skills, kind of follow that nice progression. Whereas for our writing and speaking, those expressive skills, we do see that decline. However, we also have to keep in mind that writing TELPAS changed during this time, so there's always a dip when that occurs. That's natural, okay, as we get used to a new assessment being done online. And of course, speaking is always a pain point, and I can tell you that's not exclusive. I work with lots and lots of districts across Texas and the U.S., and I can tell you speaking is not just an issue for Carrollton-Farmers branch, okay? Now, I will just say this as a side note, because a lot of people look at these data and sometimes get a little feeling frustrated and grim, specifically about the speaking component, right? And there's a lot of things that I could tell you about TELPAS. I'm sure if we all sat here and talked a little bit about some of our qualms and beef with TELPAS, there's a lot of things. Motivation of students, motivations of the district. I mean, it's right during STAR preparations, so everybody's doing that. Do I even know what I'm taking and why I'm taking it? Do I want to speak into the microphone? Do I feel embarrassed? So there's a lot of logistical components besides the scoring of the test itself. You look up a Texas Tribune article, you'll see me quoted talking a little bit about some of those qualms with TELPAS itself. And we could talk all day about that. However, I really encourage districts to pay attention to, specifically when it comes to the speaking component. Yes, we can absolutely agree there might be issues with the assessment itself. There might be issues with the motivations of students taking the test and the logistics of the administration of the exam. However, it's all of that and needing to hold all of our students to high levels of academic discourse. I can tell you, I am literally in hundreds of classrooms each school year, evaluating teachers and coaching teachers, and I can tell you largely we are missing oral language practice, right? And this is a huge component. Not only does it impact emergent bilingual students, it impacts all of our students. And so this is a really huge piece as it comes to that instructional design. And we'll talk later about content-based language instructional methods to ensure students are increasing in that oral language skill. That was my soapbox for the day on that. All right, now, again, this is a lot to take in, but I want you to be able to see the difference, a comparison between students in years 1 to 3 in U.S. schools versus 6 to 12, okay? The vast majority of our students across the state and here in Carrollton-Farmers branch our identified emergent bilingual students have been in U.S. schools 6 years or more. So if we look specifically at students in grades 6 through 12, and that I'm using those grade levels because they could have been in U.S. schools that long, we begin the count in grade 1, right, for U.S. school calculation. And so when we look at that, the majority of our kiddos in Texas public schools, and specifically here in Carrollton-Farmers branch, the majority of them have been in U.S. schools 6 years or more. And I want you just to notice a couple key aspects that cause pause for me. Now, I just pulled out the speaking domain, okay? In the full report, it has each domain broken out. But I want you just to kind of take this in for a moment. The yellow is intermediate level. This green is beginning level, okay? This blue is the advanced high, which is the highest, and then this purpley color is advanced. So what we really would hope to see in our kiddos who've been in U.S. schools 6 years or more, a higher amount of advanced to advanced high, okay, especially as they're progressing into these upper grades. And we should see a reduction in that intermediate level. But we're still seeing quite a huge gap of students still at an intermediate or even beginning level of speaking proficiency. Now, I can tell you that a lot of this may not really reflect their true abilities and levels, right? And it goes kind of back to things that we want to consider implementing as it relates to TELPAS administration, making sure the students know, 1, I'm identified as an emergent bilingual. What does that mean? 2, what is TELPAS and why am I taking this, right? What were my scores last year? Does that reflect what I actually can do? And what might be a goal for this year? I have seen districts implement that kind of individual discussions with students, and really see some improvements and gains when students actually just know what they're doing. So I think it's a lot of that, but it is also, again, like I mentioned earlier, especially in the speaking domain, needing more oral language practice and recognizing how oracy impacts students' literacy. And it's a huge piece that sometimes gets neglected as we focus on literacy. So it's not all grim, okay, but there's a need for improvement here. Now, finally, I just wanted to mention in the data this TELPAS and STAR correlation, right? We have to keep in mind TELPAS and STAR, this is STAR reading, okay, and TELPAS reading levels, okay, and just recognize that they test different things. This is apples and oranges, right? It's not the same. But we would expect that as a student progresses in their English proficiency, they should also be progressing in their performance on the STAR assessment. We would hope to kind of see that clear trajectory, okay? So as you can see across the left, this would be like beginning level, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. This is green is does not meet grade level on STAR. This orange color is approaches. The blue is meets grade level, and the pink is masters. Okay, so we do see a pretty good progression, but I would hope to see by an advanced level a reduction in just approaches and more of that, meets level at a minimum, right, as we're really progressing along that line. So seeing where does this correlate and how can we really grow, especially when we still have a lot of kiddos that are intermediate, still at a does not meet level in STAR. We also have to keep in mind, currently, although this looks like it's going to change, thankfully, when it comes to the ELPS proficiency levels, is that we will see an increase in numbers of levels as the ELPS are put back out, right, and under review. Right now, though, we only have those 4 levels. And most stages of language acquisition give us 6 to 9 stages of second language acquisition, which we're squeezing into 4 levels. So it does take time for students to move across 4 huge levels like we have. And this is where we do see a lot of kids plateauing in that intermediate level, because that's a huge span to increase. A low intermediate and a higher intermediate, it's a completely different conversation with a student, right? But they still fall under that domain. Okay, so this just helps me kind of give a picture of where are we in seeing our students progress in their English proficiency. So now, don't worry, I'm trying to leave time for some questions. I know you might have a lot of questions brooding, but what I want to get into is some of the outcomes and my recommendations. First, I just want to highlight, of course, some of the strengths that came out across those staff interviews that I was able to see. Absolutely dedicated staff. We have staff, this is within the multilingual department, this is principals, teachers, specialists. We have people who care, want to do the right thing, who are dedicated to their students and to their work. And I'll tell you what, guys, money can't buy that. This is so important, okay? That mindset of just being dedicated to the work is huge. I saw teachers saying, I want to do the right thing. I need direction, right? And so we have people who are willing and ready to do this work. I also saw a lot of trends about trusting the leadership of the multilingual department. There was even a lot of mention of improved communication as of late, and really seeing some of those improvements. I've had people talk about, oh, well, in the past it was more like this, but I'm noticing some improvement, and I'm noticing some strength. So a lot of positivity about that, and just wanting more of it, to be honest, and that's part of my recommendation. Availability for training, seeing that there's a lot that's being offered. And of course, a commitment to improving outcomes for emergent bilinguals. And again, those kind of things are things that can't really be taught. The mindset of just wanting students to succeed and being willing to do anything that it takes for that to happen, that's perfect. Because if we want to make shifts, we need people that are going to be on board, who care and want to do it. And you've got that. So you are ready to make positive shifts. So I'm going to talk in my full report. There's more recommendations, but I want to focus really just on the top 4. My first recommendations. The first one is on improving district-wide communication. And so I'm going to actually just kind of get these on the screen so that you can see them along with me. I'm not going to read them word for word, but we do need to really make sure we have some communication protocols in place between the district level staff, campuses, and all stakeholders related to emergent bilinguals. That's including parents. It's so important that we have that parental understanding of what program model design is, why their students are in emergent bilingual student programs, helping them to really buy into our programs. It's really essential, especially with the implementation of dual language programs. We need parents to feel that they understand and be involved. Okay, I highly recommend an update and a creation of the district's program manual for all of our programs related to emergent bilinguals, so that we have everything that we decide to do moving forward very clearly laid out. This goes back to that clearly defined and communicated. Clearly defined and communicated, and that's really essential to ensuring success. And making sure then that we schedule that regularly, those regular communications and what those expectations are. How many of you recognize if we don't put it on the calendar, it's not going to happen, right? We may have great plans of ensuring communication, but if we don't have that scheduled, it's just not going to happen in a timely manner. And really the whole point of this is to provide that clarity and reduce any confusion across our program implementation. Okay, so this one really impacts then the rest of my recommendations. Number 2 is ensuring consistent program structures and implementation. This is across both our bilingual and ESL programs. So 1, I mentioned this earlier, content-based language instruction practices need to be used in all classrooms. That includes all of our bilingual dual language classrooms as well as our English as a second language classrooms. The state has provided, in fact, the state has all of these wonderful resources for content-based language instruction. I kind of wrote those before I left, so I think they're pretty good. So anyways, there's some really good stuff up there on the TXEL website. So even just that as a foundation, we have a lot of material about what is content-based language instruction. It's really ensuring that we're making content comprehensible while supporting language development. We're making content comprehensible while supporting language development. That is what content-based language instruction is. Not, we've got to learn the language first and then engage with rigorous content. No, it's through grade level content that we learn language. It's the vehicle for that target language development, okay? And then making sure that our campus administrators understand the guidelines of what our program structure should be, what it should look like. They need to have that elevator pitch to know exactly when someone says, what is our ESL model? They need to be able to roll that off their tongue, okay? Whether it's to a parent, a teacher, encouraging them for that fidelity. Because it all comes down to monitoring and evaluating our consistent fidelity of program implementation. I will tell you time and again, it's not so much what a district chooses to do with their model, it's how they implement it to fidelity. A lot of times, districts will want to make changes to a program model before evaluating the fidelity to what they've been doing, okay? And that's actually key and essential. We don't want to make changes to our program model itself based on staff availability or just based on any, current data that we're seeing and thinking we've got to make a change to that program. No, we want to look back to really see, are we even implementing it to fidelity? That consistency is the biggest component. And so that actually brings me to, that creates that equity across all of our programs for all of our students and reduces the variability in experiences for our students. So, I mentioned earlier, kiddos who've been in U.S. schools 6 years or more, right? And have still not yet met the reclassification as English proficient. Typically, researchers refer to these students as long-term English learners. Now, I'm doing it like this in bunny quotes because we don't really like this term. It's a little deficit mindset. And it's not that students would ever necessarily see that label next to their name, but when we really think about our students, we don't want to communicate that deficit mindset over our kiddos. But what's real and true, and there's been many studies that I can even provide for you, much of which have been done by students here in Texas that are deemed long-term English learners. And one of the biggest components to that being the case is that variability in their program experience, right? Whether it's going in and out of inconsistent bilingual to ESL programs, whether it is highly being, mobile, going across other places that are not having that consistent implementation of the program. That is one of the biggest components that impacts a student being a long-term English learner. This one right here is one that I think is absolutely essential and very timely, and that is the restructuring of the dual language immersion program to actually be in compliance with state regulations. So what do I mean by that? To be absolutely frank with you, right now our district, it has a bit of an identity crisis, okay? We're not fully a dual language program, and we're not fully a transitional late exit bilingual program. We have a bit of an identity crisis. We're kind of mixing both of those things. And what I recommend is that we fully implement the dual language immersion program, not only because research shows us that it is actually the most beneficial for our students in the long run to build bilingualism and biliteracy, but also, to be honest, it's actually easier to implement than a transitional bilingual program because of the availability to use ESL certified teachers to co-teach with bilingual certified teachers, whereas we can't do that in a transitional bilingual program. So dollar-wise and human resource-wise, it's also beneficial. Okay, now, what are some components that I'm noticing are needing restructured and focus on? We have to standardize the language allocation for both our one-way and two-way dual language program across the district. We need to make sure that those are consistent. What I mean by the language allocation is the amount of time and through what content areas is our language of instruction, right? So in our Spanish dual language program in the district, we want to make sure that there's a clear trajectory from the pre-K when we are implementing it all the way up through at least the elementary years, and how we're implementing each of those languages of instruction, okay? Ensuring that at least 50% of the partner language, which in our case is Spanish, of that instruction in the content areas through the duration of the program. Right now, we are not currently implementing 50% of instructional time through the duration of the program. That's all grade levels up through 5th grade should be receiving, if we're fully implementing a dual language program, should be receiving at least 50% of their content instruction in the partner language, in Spanish. And I'm putting here the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 89, Subchapter BB, and the sections in which this references the law. From there also, this right here, I've talked a little bit with the multilingual department about the criteria for non-EB students. Now, there's not a said additional criteria for non-EB students to participate. What I mean by that is we don't want to restrict non-EB students by saying they have to have a certain English proficiency or Spanish proficiency in order to participate in our two-way dual language program. There may not be a said practice of that happening currently, but really this is something we want to consider as a mindset. We want our teachers to understand that just like for our emergent bilingual students, our non-emergent bilingual students, the program's going to work for them too. Whether they have an IEP, whether they have 504, dyslexia, any other components and differences that we might be concerned that they won't be able to perform, they actually will be able to. So that was more of a mindset shift that we want to make sure we see. And this is really important, ensuring that training in biliteracy instruction, which includes bridging and cross-linguistic analysis, is provided for our dual language teachers to truly understand when and how to provide formalized bridging, as well as in instruction to do cross-linguistic analysis instead of concurrent translation. I will tell you, in ESL classrooms and in bilingual classrooms, concurrent translation is one of the biggest components that can be make the program ineffective. And what that basically is when a teacher says everything once in English and then says it again in Spanish and back and forth in that manner. That's not maintaining the language of instruction, right? We can allow for our students to translanguage, but the teacher needs to maintain the language of instruction and focus on particular places within the lesson cycle in which we bridge and have students facilitate cross-linguistic analysis, which builds that for them, okay? I know I'm getting really maybe a little deep because I get excited, so I apologize for getting a little excited and nerding out on the linguistic side, so excuse me. But overall, we want to increase the effectiveness of the dual language program and the long-term bilingualism and biliteracy trajectories. We have a strong foundation ready in Carrollton-Farmers branch. We are poised at a good point to be able to do this, but we have some changes that need to be made so that we ensure our students actually all come out bilingual and biliterate in the end, okay? The last one I want to just emphasize is increasing staffing and having role clarity. And so this is for our multilingual department. I can tell you guys, I try not to use specific names in my reports, but a lot of our multilingual program division was just named consistently with praising their efforts and the things that they're doing to support the campuses, but just saying, but we just need more. We need more. And so really needing, especially at the secondary level, some more staff to be able to spread the love a little bit and get more personal touches with our secondary campuses particularly. And making sure we clearly define those roles and responsibilities of district staff and campus staff so that we understand what you need to do versus what the campus needs to do, so that's clearly defined. And ensuring we consistently use data to identify campuses with the greatest needs and then allocate our resources accordingly. So if we have campuses with higher percentages of emergent bilingual students, we want to allocate our resources in that manner. Ensure that we're meeting all their needs. And it's just about increasing the capacity of all of our staff to meet our program goals. Now, if again, you want to see that full report, you can jot down this bit.ly. And of course, I'm sure Ms. Holcomb can share that out. But you can write that down. It is case sensitive, capital P, capital E, capital CT for Carleen Thomas. And then, of course, you could scan that QR to view the full report as you would like. Okay, and I'll leave that up there a little bit and allow for questions. I hope I did okay on my time. I know I talked very fast. So, questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to share this report with the teachers of the schools that you were at?
Great question. So our department went through about an hour and a half, I guess, kind of breakdown of all this data. We've already put a few things in action with our current internal multilingual program department in response. There's some other things that are going to require longer term planning and bringing our task force back together to evaluate. There's not many changes made with this program in quite a while, so the evaluation was necessary to know where do we need to go. So now that we have that information, we wanted, of course, the board to hear the report. And then we will then move forward with more complete communication with each of the campuses, as well as all of the rest of the department that needs to hear it. So yes, we will be able to go through some of this in more detail, but the principals also need to go through the training or the report in detail as well. So they will be a part of the task force and bringing all of them together. So the answer to that is yes.
Is there a need to buy different curriculum, or do we have it? We just need to.
I'll be honest, we needed Carleen because there was a lot of layers of what we need to look at, and we want to make sure that we are fiscally responsible with what we need to do and that what we can actually accomplish with the current staff that we have. They are small but mighty. They've done an amazing job. I do believe there might be a need for us to look at some of the resources that we currently have, the curriculum that we currently have that we're using to implement in our ESOL and ELDA classes. I think we need to look at that deeply. So yes, I think there might be some things that we need to kind of shift some things around to get some refresh and some high quality curriculum materials.
And to back that up a little bit, probably to looking at if we're going to ensure, because right now, really from up through third grade, we have our kiddos in the dual language program coded as dual language, and then really fourth and fifth, we're coding as transitional bilingual program, a late exit program. And by doing so, that may also, as we shift to hopefully really fully implementing the dual language program, we need to make sure that we have the materials that are needed to ensure that we can provide the content in the language of instruction needed. So yes, so Kim, good point there.
What is the fiscal impact of this as we move towards it? Is there extra money from the state as a result? Is there?
Great point, Randy. Yeah. Hope you don't mind I'm using first names. So I apologize if that's, I like first names, but that's fine. So Randy, good point. So first of all, good news is when we fully implement a dual language program, there is a bump in funding. That came that's my contact. That came, 3 legislative sessions ago. We began receiving additional funds for students coded in a dual language program, and for the first time received additional funding in our two-way programs, our kiddos, our non-EB students who are participating in a two-way dual language program. So when we fully implement it to fidelity, because we need those additional resources, the state's providing additional funds for that. So right now, the district's actually They were all Carrollton-Farmers branch data only.
Okay, so
Yes.
it's all CFP.
All CFP students.
Okay.
Oh gosh, I'm pushing
Sorry,
stuff.
I was thinking.
I was like, what am I doing?
I was gonna go back to this one.
Oh, sorry.
Um,
I was like, what am I doing?
okay, thank you. And then on your recommendations and performing the program, with fidelity and the 50% split. And
Yes, ma'am.
I'm dating my years.
That's okay.
But when the program was in the early infancy, and I'm talking the dual language
program, yes.
I feel like that was a 50%, and I might not be, maybe it's you, I don't know which one, but I feel like we were at a 50% at one time. What caused our stray, and then do you feel like some of those scores is a result of that stray? I mean, and how far away are we from that 50%?
That's a great question, and actually Lane can probably provide some context as well. I can say from what I have been able to discover that when COVID hit, it really did a number on how we were serving kids and trying to help catch them up because they went home and we didn't have, the way to do our instruction the way that they were used to. So I think that put a little bit of a shift on things, and in fact, in some of our campuses, the dual language program was not able to be sustainable afterwards based on the number of kids that were coming back to school. So I think that that's sort of a little bit of a recovery mode, if you will. And the other part of that is we were noticing that in our secondary data, we were seeing that we were having a lot of strong Spanish speakers and doing well in some of our Spanish areas, but we also didn't have kids coming out that were doing well in English. So that whole biliteracy piece, we could see that shift. And to Carlene's point, that 4th and 5th grade year, to do a true 50-50, we have to have that day in both languages, not doing 80-20 or 60-40. And so with that requires then a program restructure and making sure that we're on the same page between both dual language programs. So with one at one school and one at the other, we have to have consistency in the way that we're implementing the program. That was another piece that was at play. So there's a lot of things that have to be looked at program-wise and the structure of what we're doing to meet that need, and then to also get us sort of back on track as you were mentioning.
And I'll add to that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, that was perfect.
Okay.
That was-
And I would add to that, so when we think about really one thing we have to keep in mind is that The majority of our emergent bilingual students in Texas, and specifically here in Carrollton-Farmers branch, are what we refer to as sequential bilinguals. Right? It's kind of like the old school mentality that we have a lot of sequential bilinguals. They're more simultaneous, because sequential bilinguals is like, I come with high levels of Spanish, for instance, let's just use Spanish. I come with these high levels of Spanish, and then we're going to transition that to English, right? That's more of that sequential bilingual trajectory that most of our kiddos are not on, right? Most of our kiddos are what we call those simultaneous bilinguals, who've been exposed to both languages really from infancy, in their environments, in their homes, right? And so when they come to school, it's not like they necessarily have these high levels of one language, or really even a dominant language. And what we want, most of our current research in dual language is focusing on biliteracy from the start. In fact, there's a book by Dr. Kathy Escamilla specifically about doing that biliteracy from the start. And this kind of goes back to, does this then breed into that success of the program? Are we ensuring that our kiddos are not coming into middle school with lacking in their English literacy? Because if we're not really building in the ELD component, the English language development component, alongside the Spanish literacy from the start, then we're not building that trajectory from the bottom. Now, when we think about what we're going to implement, what I would pose to you is this: as you consider what kind of model are we going to really implement here, there are several clear choices. Some dual language program models begin with high levels of what we refer to as the minority language, right? And that's for both our two-way and one-way programs, where they would begin with 80% or 90% of their day in Spanish. That's content in Spanish, okay? And then they would slowly
the programs were first being implemented, and the academic presentations that were done with to parents, and talking about the benefit of that 50-50 instruction, and how it, like, I mean, they almost said rewires the brain
It does.
on learning, and how it helps their long-term learning, long past when they're out of the program. And that has stuck with me, that it's a great program.
100%. I mean, I could go on all day about the, brain science behind bilingualism and the benefits. Delaying Alzheimer's, and I mean, like, so many benefits that bilingualism, and much of which doesn't really come out until later. A lot of times when we're evaluating success of dual language programs, I encourage us to be careful when we look at, especially like early years, like we could look at third grade and be like, oh my gosh, they're all lacking, right? It looks bad. Or it looks like it's lower than the monolingual classroom. Ooh, this isn't working. And a lot of districts then pull or change because they see that, but we're really not going to see that data really fully come to fruition until that longitudinal aspect and when kiddos are fully like through the program, right? And again, if we're maintaining that fidelity of right? We're gonna get them to that trajectory of bilingualism and biliteracy, but you gotta stay with us. So it's important that parent communication as well. Yes?
I have a question. So my kids have all gone through that program too. So we've had a couple different renditions of it. But I remember when my oldest was going through it, I do feel like there was more of that immersive when she was younger, and then bringing more of the English in later. And when my second one went through it, it was more of a 50-50 model, and which I feel like was not helpful with her.
Yes.
But I do wonder, so I know that first one was the one that you said was more approved by studies and everything. Is that also the most successful for the native Spanish speaking children?
Yes.
To still have that
High levels of the Spanish
and
instruction.
then bring the English in?
So because if we're following a biliteracy model, it's important that we recognize they must have that ELD component alongside the Spanish literacy from the beginning. That's where sometimes folks leave that out, and they need that from that start, so that it's not all just Spanish literacy, but they're getting those ELD components from the beginning, at least in small amounts. And to be honest, what we also threaten, kind of with that simultaneous bilinguals of our students, recognizing that, for instance, if I'm just instructing, this is why content-based language instruction across all programs is important for teachers to be trained in, because just because it says Spanish on my home language survey, whether that's my primary usage language or my home, does not mean I have high levels of Spanish, right? And so our kiddos also, when they're receiving that Spanish instruction, even if that's their home language, actually really need that literacy. They may be orally proficient, but not having that strong literacy component. And to be frank, it's just easier to learn to read in Spanish than it is in English. And I'm with you. I've even experienced for my own two kiddos. My daughter was at 50-50 in kinder from the beginning versus my son who was at 90-10 from kinder, and massive difference. Now, I always caution us to not bank everything off of this one kid, but that can be that, information that we see coming in families.
Yeah, I just know we saw, just in general, as we were at start. So I just remember seeing in general, I know looking back now that my oldest one having that more immersive, more Spanish, very little English, she had been more successful with it. And I know her classmates have as well.
Yes.
And versus that 50-50, I feel like it was a lot harder to get bilingual.
Yes, actually bilingual.
Actually
bilingual. And I will tell you, one note here is it's called dual language immersion for a reason. And there's a difference between immersion and submersion, right? Submersion is when we're we bring an English learner, sink or swim, drop them, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and figure it out. That's submersion, right? That's not helpful. But when we think about structured immersion, right, this is why we have a clear language allocation plan that schedules and, allocates the language that they're going to need across multiple grade levels and subject areas to get to that bilingualism and biliteracy, so that they have opportunities for structured immersion, right? So that they can immerse themselves, but with a teacher who fully understands how to support that cross-linguistic analysis. That's what's so beneficial about that. So I always like to point that out, because the immersion we use in a dual language immersion program is not the same thing as just like a sink or swim approach. Yeah.
Do you feel that maybe their native tongue is a lot of the problem to continue, for the teachers to continue their fidelity in the program?
What do you mean by that?
So,
Explain
in
more.
other words, I was taught for Texas, matches, mechas. Spanish is cerillos. So my mother-in-law that's from Mexico was like, what? To both.
Yes. So do you mean you're talking about kind of like some of the differences in dialect of the Spanish? Yeah. So I think that kind of comes back to that content-based language instruction of ensuring that when we are talking about certain topics in Spanish, for instance, that I always say this to teachers, ask first, right? What do you think this is? What do you call this, right? Because we're going to get multiple versions of what it is, and this might come back, because maybe our families all come from multiple countries, even areas of the same country. Social economic status can play into some of the language that we use, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it all kind of comes back to that training on what does it look like to make cross-linguistic connections that are asset-based of students, as in recognizing they bring information to the table. So I think it really goes back to the instructional design. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Are teachers trained to know how to not just say, well, this is what it is, only this one word, or are we actually, asking students, what else might we call this, kind of a thing. And I will say, kind of to your point as well, is recognizing that that cross-linguistic transfer is so important, right? What we want our parents to understand as well is learning to read is cognitive skills, right? So let's say a parent does not speak English, and so they're like, I don't know how to help my kiddo. No, read to them in Spanish, right? Read to them in their native language. Because the more you do that and ask them questions about what they read, you're building cognitive skills, inferencing, and all the comprehension, and that is going to transfer as they gain English vocabulary, right? So those things will transfer, and also that productive struggle of a lot of times we used to kind of researchers used to refer to it as negative transfer. We don't really use that anymore, as in when things like false cognates, for instance, might confuse a child, right? But actually that process of confusion actually supports them growing in the brain development, for instance, and being able to handle multiple intake. I'm totally nerding out, guys, and I'm sorry. I'm getting excited. So let me have a yes.
So what is the expected timeline to try to implement this?
It's a great question. Our plan was after the audit was presented, we were going to pull our task force together and of course get communication out. Some of the things, I'm kind of listening to Carlene go through this again, and I'm thinking back of the history. After COVID, with the teacher turnover and then of course recruiting in teachers, we had a lot of new young teachers in the field. We also were trying to recruit and make sure that we got in enough teachers that were bilingual and certified. So all of this kind of plays into that consistency and depth of training and understanding. So those are things we have got to work on. And so I think with this spring, the number one thing we have to determine is our program model. And what is it that we want to roll out and deliver. But that needs to come with multiple layers of stakeholder input that have been a part of this for a long time. There's a lot of great history and a lot of great foundation in CFB around the dual language program, and we want to build on those strengths. So that's very important. There's a lot of success stories of things that have come out of our programs that we want to continue. So I want to honor that, but also see what we need to do to move forward and get everybody sort of on the same page, and then we can roll out a training plan, look at a financial plan of do we need additional resources, staffing, what does that need to look like? So we have a lot of planning that needs to happen, and I think further conversations will be needed after we're able to process everything.
So this was for the two-way, right?
This was a full audit for.
But similar for one-way?
It was all of it.
I know, but right now you said for dual. This is for
Well, no, it'll be for
That's the
everybody.
same.
everything.
Yes.
Yes.
And so you can. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you spoke to it, just really determining the language model, and then from there, determine the basis of the implementation of targeted PDs for not just teachers, but principals, and just the departments, making sure that everything is aligned and streamlined into the implementation of the program.
And when we're talking program, we're talking about the dual language immersion program, which includes both one-way and two-way, and ensuring that those models align across all campuses.
And can I add to, not only for, we're looking at the elementary, but what is the impact for secondary?
Yes.
Because that right there is where we're going to see the longevity of the effectiveness of the program.
So are you I didn't quite get it from the statement or the question on timeline. Are you targeting 25, 26 year to have this in place, or is this more longer term?
There's gonna probably be both. There are some short-term things that we will have to determine really soon for 25, 26. But there will be some other things that might have to be more longer-term planning if it requires, specifics around staffing that we can't address immediately. I do believe we'll be able to tackle, actually, we've already put some things in place already. I will have to give Tuet a great shout out. She already developed the internal, I'm gonna call it the intranet, but it's the internal communication, and built out a full platform of all the information for our staff. So principals, teachers, everybody that needs access to the internal piece, that communication is now much more robust. There's also a parent newsletter that's been going out. Our social media platform is opened back up. And so all those communication tools are starting to kind of, flow out. So that's the start. But then the bigger planning needs to come with the team. And so we will have to do some things immediately, but I do think there's some other things that we can sort of look at. What do we need to do now? And then what can we do along the way? Mm-hmm. We certainly don't want to overwhelm staff. We want to make sure that we have all the right pieces in place. And we want to make sure that we are considerate of where kids are within the program. Mm-hmm. Carlene will work further with us and continue to help guide us on what do we need to do so we don't have a knee-jerk reaction as kids are already in the program models, and so that we may have to grandfather some things out and then maybe have a new kind of bringing on board with a different model below them. I don't know. There's a lot of things we need to think through.
Take a while.
It could.
Definitely.
It could. But there are some do-nows that we are going to have to jump on.
Yes. Yeah. It's like stop the bleeding, right, in those high need areas, right? And that's once we figure out exactly how we're going to implement the model holistically, then we can kind of figure out what the right rollout of that timeline looks at. Just like Kim was talking about, making sure that where kiddos are in the trajectory is a huge. We don't want that craziness change for them, and also teachers. We have to recognize the implementation of a dual language immersion program, unlike any other program, requires buy-in of mindsets, right? That we are building towards bilingualism and biliteracy. We need that mindset for the teachers, for the campus administrators, for the parents to fully believe in and buy into that. And that this works if we implement it to fidelity following that language allocation. So, but it's like a yes, now we're going to make some changes, but it's probably a multi-year rollout. Okay, thank you.
So I have a question about your program evaluation. Oftentimes all we use is our state mandated test. So is there ongoing, like at your time at TEA, and I know there's discussion concerning all program of evaluation, because we get into a program and then we're like, wow, look what it could, or where we need to adjust. And sometimes we just look like, we waited, we see our results, but we could have ensured our fidelity along the way. Because I know I've been in these classrooms and you've got new young teachers and they do exactly what you said. They want to help the student, and instead of going, no, I can't, they'll talk in English and they'll just start, and they know the model, but teachers are, that's what good, I mean, I'm not saying they're good, but that's what we do. We're like, oh, we got you don't understand. But what can we do that we have ongoing program evaluation that is consistent before we take a state test, and then the teachers that have worked so hard and the passion's there that it didn't do, now we're sitting in a meeting going, well, we should have had more oral language, right?
So multiple things there. Yes, we have to be careful of the pobrecito mentality, right? Oh, pobrecito. Let me just help you, right? And then we water it down, right? And we don't maintain that fidelity. And it's with a good heart, right? So with a good heart that we're doing that. And so what you just said, really is going to require that consistent training and follow-up on content-based language instruction, and ensuring teachers understand how to implement the biliteracy model and daily content-based language instruction. On the kind of progress monitoring side, I don't know if you guys already use things like MAP data, right? So really focusing in on making sure they're taking those in both English and Spanish, and tracking that data, right? Having those discussions over that. Also, do you guys use Summit K-12? I know that's another, there's others out there, but Summit K-12 is another program that helps. It's more English, but it's really to help prepare them for TELPAS. practicing, using the microphone and those kind of things. That's just another one that I hear a lot of districts using and seeing success with on the motivation side and the practice side of those things. You can also use more anecdotal type of data using resources. I could share with you free resources from Actful is probably one of the only places that you can find language proficiency rubrics in multiple languages. Because, of course we can use the ELPS PLDs anecdotally throughout the year. Now that teachers, it's nice that teachers don't have to rate TELPAS anymore, but then we have a whole load of teachers that don't know the proficiency level descriptors. So using those periodically over time, having them really get, oh, that's what a beginning level looks like really getting into those proficiency level descriptors, and then using something like those Actful rubrics for Spanish to see how they can anecdotally also measure them in Spanish proficiency along the way is another thing. Because sometimes, as you know, our kiddos get tested out and they just don't want to take the test, and so sometimes the data that we get, maybe even in a map day, it was just a bad day and it just looks terrible. That's why some of the use of rubrics along the way for that anecdotal teacher analysis can be really beneficial.
So on the staffing recommendations, especially for secondary, do you have that model set up? Because, we don't want to add more specialists that, compound our budget that, is already in a deficit. And then they don't understand, we have all these people, like, what do they really need?
So here's what I would suggest. One of the most, I think, beneficial things you can do with current staff you have, before hopefully adding more, because it's good down the line. But what can we do now?
Right.
Is I would utilize some of your content area specialists to work in tandem with your ESL specialists, right? Train those content specialists in content-based language instruction. Have them do co-observations if they're not already. Have them do co-trainings if they're not already. So that, and you guys know it's true, right? Like as a teacher, here comes that ESL lady again. Oh,
right.
Geez, you're gonna tell me to do this other thing again. But then they see their math coach walking out. Oh, great! Yeah, seriously, she's gonna tell me everything I need to know. Because it's that trust of like that content area specialist sometimes. And so I think the more that you utilize the relationship between the content area specialist and your ESL or bilingual specialist really strengthens your capacity right there. Because then they also see that content area specialist elevating that ESL or bilingual specialist and working in tandem. And then you've already got, it's like you're building ambassadors, so that you're building their capacity to ensure that emergent bilinguals are at the forefront of their mind, and that they're trained, they're knowledgeable, providing them with basic resources like checklists and rubrics, that even like the simple ones that the state provides, so that they know the language as they build their capacity. So I think in the short term, utilizing those relationships can support before you're able to, hire more staff.
So I just wanted to share on that. We actually this year, we cross-trained our multilingual department with our current content coaches all the way up, elementary to high school. They are working on that, and that was a really great suggestion. Carly and I have been in conversations for almost a year now, and I'm stealing suggestions and ideas from her. So we implemented that this year, and that's been very helpful. We have also done intentional training. When we're doing staff development training, like on our PD days, our multilingual department staff is cross-training with our content department in those PD sessions. So everything has that layer of building that second language in all training. So it's not like you go to this training and then you go to this training.
Yeah.
But we are also doing differentiated training for the areas that need it, if it's just specifically with bridging or translanguaging. And so we are working on some of those pieces with the current staff that we have. And so we've got more work to do, and we need to continue to work on that, and that intentionality with the walkthroughs and things of that nature, and the partnering with the EL teachers. So we are still working on again, that's part of our bigger PD plan, but I think right now that has been very helpful, and it has yielded some
to help, and it is in the content to kind of build the language and the instruction together.
Like as simple as if the only place that, during a training, if the only time they ever see, a language objectives modeled is during a bilingual or ESL specialist training and not in a content area, then we're not showing consistency across something basic like ensuring students have language objectives alongside content objectives. So it's some of that basic consistency. Because our bilingual and ESL programs are general education programs. We're serving them through the content. Right? They're specialized, but they're part of that basic right for students to access the curriculum. Other questions? I feel like I probably took more time, but it was good. It's a good discussion.
Ms. Thomas, thank you, Board. Is there any other questions we have right now? We'll probably have a lot of questions in the next year. The only question that I have to wrap this up is, are there any compliance issues relative to the state that we need to be aware of or targeting toward?
We have a few. Mostly it's which was mentioning about the transitional late exit, and so we need to work on that. We can take care of that one pretty easily, and so we will be able to tackle that soon. As far as the overarching big pieces, we've done a good job with the compliance pieces on that end.
Great.
So there's a lot of really positive things to be, thankful for, but I'm glad that Carlene was able to come and pull out some things that we might not have known. And because of her expertise in that area working with the state, she was able to give us some other areas to work on. So
Basically, I'm a PEMS nerd. But I'll tell you the good thing is, Randy, that one, you're being fiscally responsible by not miscoding your students in 4th and 5th grade who are technically not in a dual language program. So basically at a focused look by grade level, you're in compliance with the program because you're explaining the program that they're seated in. The thing is, Randy, that we want to think about is when we take a step back and we look at, are we in compliance with dual language program implementation as a whole? The answer is no. Singularly though, by student, are we fiscally being responsible to code them correctly and ensure we're not taking money from the state that we shouldn't? You're being compliant in that regard, but programmatically, we're not in compliance as a whole. Does that make sense?
Sure, it does. Again, thank you for your presentation, and we'll go forward from there.
Great.
Thank
you guys so much.
for your
Thank
energy
you.
and your
Of course,
passion.
I'm a little bit passionate, so.
she's kept us going over the last year, so
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much, Carly.
Of course. Thank you.
Dr. Hamlin, you're up on our next item, the student enrollment transfer process.
Thank you. Do you want a salad? You want a salad? Oh, did you? Ask Carlene if she wants. Do you want a salad? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye to it. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for all your work. Thank you.
Mr. Chapman, thank you for the opportunity to kind of give you an overview of our proposed attendance zones changes. And, we wanted to provide you a one-pager today, but when we started getting into it, we saw that just was not going to be possible. So we thought the best way to kind of share this information would be to kind of show you through the web page exactly how you find the information and exactly what information is there. As you can see, you have three options here. When you look at the proposals, you'll see side by side, you'll see the proposed versus our current. And for the elementaries, you'll notice that we only have 2 of our campuses that would not be impacted by the actual attendance zone changes. You make it smaller?
Yeah, just close that little text to make the screen slightly bigger.
Okay. So if you see up here, we have
He got on there.
There you go.
Very, very sensitive. You can see McWhorter here, that's our current, and then you see the proposed McWhorter, doesn't change. You'll see Kent as well, over here, our current, and then proposed. It doesn't change. Those are the only two elementary campuses that would not be impacted with the attendance zone changes. And then you ask, well, exactly how does it impact the campuses, all the other campuses? When you scroll down, and you'll see divided by feeder pattern, you'll see exactly how it impacts the campuses. And if you're talking about just the Furneaux Elementary, for example, you can see that for no elementary students, they would now be going to either, based on their address, Thompson Elementary or Davis Elementary. Okay? When you see here it says Rosemead Elementary, and it says no resident students currently zoned for Rosemead will change. That means the students this year, if they're zoned for Rosemead, they're going to go to Rosemead. Next year, if they're zoned for Rosemead, they're going to go to Rosemead. You see in that feeder pattern there. So it gives you very descriptive information on exactly why a student would be going to a different campus or a student would be staying on their campus. Same thing for the Smith feeder pattern. You see Country Place is going to be going to, and you see Carrollton, those students that are impacted by the attendance zone changes. And once again, every elementary in that feeder pattern has the descriptors. You see there are several campuses that are not impacted. Once again, McWhorter Elementary not impacted. When you look at the Turner feeder pattern, same thing. Farmers Branch, not impacted. If you look at Blair, the students that live at that address, the Valwood Park subdivision between Longmead Drive and Josie Lane, and along Lamar, I think that is, Drive, they're going to attend Farmers Branch. So it's very descriptive on which kids are going to be impacted by the change. And then Ranch View, their campuses in the feeder pattern are listed as well. So this here gives you all the information that you need in order for you to be able to share that with our community. And then you scroll up, we also have this for our middle schools and high schools. And you can see the middle schools, same thing. All the campuses are impacted other than Bush for middle school. Our current and proposed. And then down below, they have the same descriptors. Those field students, who live at Dutch Village, Oak Brook, Townhomes, Oak Brook Estates, so all of that, they're going to be attending Perry. So this gives you all the information that our community would need in order to see exactly how they're going to be impacted. You can look at the high schools. All high schools will be impacted except, and you can see Ranch View. Smith, you can see, changes just a little bit. Creekview, you can see this is what it is right now. This is what it will be. Turner, you can see a little bit difference. Right here, straight across here. Ranch View, once again, is the one that stays completely intact. And then the information envelope. For the Smith students impacted at Morningside, Cedar Point, will attend Creekview High School. And then Turner is another example there. So it's all right there. It's extremely easy to get to, and it's very clear on exactly how they're going to be impacted. Once again, they're just high school. The only campus not impacted is going to be Ranch View. The middle school is going to be Bush. Elementary is McWhorter and Kent. And then when you talk about all the attendance zone changes, consolidations, the question really comes, what about registration? How are we handling registration? Registration, we are going to expect every student in the district to register for their attendance zone campus, their home campus, okay? Now, if they're a consolidated school and they do not want to attend their home campus, we do expect them to register for their home campus, but they do have an opportunity to apply for a transfer. Okay? So everybody, we're not taking that opportunity to apply for a transfer away from anyone. But obviously, we'll be looking at capacity, enrollment caps, things like that. So that opportunity will still be there for them. We've had questions about programs. What programs will have transportation? We typically, I look at it as a need and a want, right? The programs where our students absolutely need in order to be successful, like dual language want, that one-way dual language, they have to have that program. So we do provide transportation for that program. We provide transportation for elite. Those are our students, obviously, that are 2 years or more above grade level. They need that enrichment. They need those type of classrooms. So we provide transportation for that. We provide transportation for our special ed, self-contained classes as well. We have some campuses that do not offer pre-K. So if your home campus does not offer pre-K, we offer transportation to the pre-K placement campus. So it's very limited on who has that transportation opportunity.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if I have applied and I'm now going to Blaylock, and I'm still not in the Blaylock feeder pattern, even with the changes, do I have to reapply to go to Blaylock? Am I gonna get kicked out because I'm not a Blaylock residential student, even though I'm now here as a sixth grader?
So could you say it one more time?
So in the past, if your kid registers and they're accepted to Blaylock and they're not in their attendance zone, you didn't have to reapply again, you just automatically were Blaylocked
Okay, yeah.
when you re-register every year?
Yes.
But now, am I gonna get kicked out of Blaylock because I'm not a resident of Blaylock?
Because you're not zoned.
Zone, thank you.
We expect everyone to apply for their resident, their attendance zone campus. And then once, if you really are at field, but right now you're going to Blaylock, we're gonna expect them to apply, register for field, and then apply for a transfer.
Even if I've already
Yes.
spent my sixth grade year there?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know, that's,
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm coming from a personal, perspective when we transferred to Bush. If this had been going on and Jake was not kicked out, but there was a change, okay, there was a change, there was a change. But he had already made that transition for sixth grade, maybe seventh grade, and then there was a change that was district driven through other necessities, and then reapplying for Bush, and for whatever reason didn't get that transfer approved again. That's more detrimental, I think. I've got concerns with that.
That's the scary part, is
I-
if there's worry that, maybe he won't get reaccepted.
Right, that there's concerns. I know we're rebalancing, everything, and that the party, we've got new, zones, but, if there's a priority, or those children that already have those transfers, either for a program or for whatever reason already in place, I think that needs to be.
Yeah, we
Well,
are having
and
those
I thought I discussed grandfathering.
We talked about grandfathering at the elementary, those fourth graders going into fifth grade. Those students would be grandfathered as well as their siblings. The siblings would be grandfathered that next year, but they would not be grandfathered after that. So then they would have to apply for a transfer. And we are, and I know obviously we're in development phases right now.
I know.
We're everything's out on the table.
So.
Well, I want to request, just because I have personal, a lot of us have transferred our kids, but, especially in middle school, in middle school years and going in from the higher
Oh, no.
elementary.
So
over,
if you look
those
at,
are really-
and you're also, to me, if you're asking everybody to re-register, how are you keeping track? That just seems like, if we're controlling caps, then it is, here's the cap already. I think that needs, that doesn't match up with the transfer process that was presented.
I think the key is transfer. They've already applied for a transfer to the school.
You know, what's the difference between a
Yes.
transfer,
We're not
but you're
talking
asking
about-
everybody to re-register. There's a
agree.
difference
Not a
between
new
a transfer, because if you're already there, you want them to re-register. I don't know how you're
Well,
gonna keep
yeah,
track of
and
that.
it's,
That's
once again,
confusing to me.
it's based on the change in the attendance zone. What we've talked about is that if they're in an attendance zone, then they would, that's where they would register for. And then we would obviously have that transfer, so we know exactly these students are there on a transfer.
You're gonna have different numbers, I just would.
I agree.
We're definitely talking
I
about
think we
that.
have to
Yeah.
really
Just keep that in mind.
define
Yeah.
that process, because I agree with you, Tara. I think that, you know, we have people that have already been, like, if I had a 7th grader and then they're now gonna hope that they get to go back, that's not,
Yeah.
And we
because
had-
when we looked at the zoning, you're also looking at how many students were, we didn't try to upset the entire zone. We looked at residents versus, I think you need to go back to the report, because it wasn't intended that everybody need to re-register to upset the whole
Well-
apple cart. I don't believe in that.
Well,
So
and-
I
and
think
I-
that needs to be highly studied in the next few days before you put out, you want everybody to re-register. Because I don't know how you're gonna keep track of it.
So-
I have high concerns with that.
That's why I want to be clear, because if you've had a kid already go through that process, you wouldn't know to re-register for your home campus and then do a retransfer request. So if you were to live through that once, you wouldn't
Yeah.
it wouldn't even dawn on you that you would have to do it again.
So when a child re-registers, I mean, are you
We'll
starting
redevelop
from
it.
scratch?
Yeah, 'cause we talked
Are they
about.
starting from scratch, or does their information come up?
Well, but if we talked about, because we know a lot of people are gonna want to be grandmothered in, and because that's basically what we're talking about. And we can't grandfather every grade level in, because we're not gonna have the space. And that's the conversations that we had. So we're looking at each grade level, and, you know, once again, we talked about that 4th grade going into 5th, 7th grade going into 8th. And so we've had those conversations, and we're still developing it.
I know, I just wanted you to keep that in mind. because
Absolutely.
For those of us who have used the transfer portal and parents that expect it to be there, that'll be a great jump.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask, when does the application and transfer window, when do they open?
They open, our registration, online registration will open up April the 1st. Our out-of-district transfers open up that March 24th, and then all other transfers will open up on April the 1st as well.
And we maintain that, I mean, through any of changes, I mean, obviously, CFB ISD students have first pass at
Yes.
transfer requests
Yes, ma'am.
before out of district is
Yes,
even
so
considered.
we have created a transfer, 25-26 transfer guideline for our community. We are going through the revision stages now. We've had several departments we've partnered with, our counseling department, our CTE department, our technology department. We just got feedback today from our SPED department. So once that goes live, it'll have all that information in there, as well as the priority list as well, like you just mentioned. All that will be there.
Okay.
And it's something we've never had before.
I know there's been discussion in the past about us using transportation for kids that are choosing different CCMR programs across the district for high school. Are we going to have transportation for kids that are choosing Ranch View, but they're a Smith kid?
We are talking about that right now. And it's really based on the impact it has on our transportation, but those are conversations we're having.
Perry is in the Smith Theater, right? And the McLaughlin Strickland is in the Turner Theater. So looking back on the
not been updated at this time, but it will be.
So if we use this map and you try to log in, or you try to zoom in, can you see the major intersection? No?
That
No.
it's
It's
not.
not
Oh,
loading.
okay.
Okay, so scrolling down to where it lists the neighborhoods, you list, down to Perry, I think.
Leon, you might be able to show the
So, so you say that Oak Brook Townhomes, Estates, Forest Circle, Brookhaven Village, and Brookhaven will attend Perry. Those are, I know Brookhaven is actually McLaughlin Strickland School, and I didn't see that change made. So are they then switching feeder patterns?
We'll look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Work in progress.
It is.
We thank you for your good work and keep up the good work. And
We want to be able to make sure all of our families and community knows that we're going to take care of them. And that is our goal.
that is the goal. Excellent. Board, any other questions?
Yeah, Dr. Hamlin, on the communication methods for the enrollment or re-enrollment and process, I mean, what's the timing on, and how will that be delivered? Is it solely Parent Square related, or is it messages, or, I mean, you know how I feel.
Well, I know, you're right. We have 3 different methods that we're going to be communicating with our families. One is going to be that personalized letter that they're going to be getting, letting them know exactly any changes that impact them. They'll be getting a parent square message as well. And if they are going to be a consolidated, or going to a new school, then they'll get a welcoming message from the principal. And our goal is to have all of that done prior to spring break, which is right around March 14th.
And what about families in those specific schools that aren't impacted by any rezoning? Well, and let's just call it on the west side, you know, our Ranchview, the Ranchview and Bush. Are those parents gonna get hey, there's a lot of change that's discussing,
This will
but
be your,
you don't need to do
yes,
any,
sir.
because I think there's just as much potential for confusion on
Right.
whether you don't need to do anything.
Or do I? Yeah.
Or do I?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Hammond, thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Appreciate all your hard work. And your team, gentlemen, we love you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Or do we want to take a short break before we turn things over to Mr. Bocek on our what's called our superintendent bills?
Just quick.
Let's take a 5-minute break, stretch, and do whatever, and then we come back. The next item on our agenda.
Randy, can I say something before we move to the next agenda item? I just want to clarify, hang on one second. I just want to clarify that we will get this transportation process of how it affects every student, because I don't want this to be more confusion than what we ever intended to disrupt anything. And so my question is always, how does this affect me? Like, what does that look like? Is it registering? Is it enrolling? Is it transferring? So we will get those clear guidelines with a chart so everyone knows, so that it's not very disruptive. Like, we want to make everything as seamless and take care of our families. That is our number one priority. So I just want that clarified, because I kind of felt like that was a little
That
confusing.
is a concern for all.
Okay.
Our next item on the agenda is revised district superintendent goals. I'd like to say on this that there was, as this came in, Mr. Bocci asked for this. We don't typically do closed session on work study, and yet this has been a closed session item on several meetings, and the work this committee has done has been like that, and I didn't communicate that effectively to Ms. Canada, who did exactly what she should have done. So anyway, it's a little bit different here, and thank you, Mr. Bocci, for doing the two-step and making this work for us.
And to clarify, I'm filling in for Cassandra, who is on the work committee, because as you know, she usually leads this discussion. And you can decide what you're saying. One more shirt. So this is the continuation of the work that we've been doing on reviewing our collaborative vision 2030, and developing, what we feel the priorities should be to better set our goals from top down, so that they are aligned from superintendent down to campus, and everybody knows what our focus is and what our priority is. And so today we were working on strategic priority 3, optimize community engagement, and strategic priority 4, optimize social and emotional health of all students. As a reminder, these were the strategic priorities developed by our community teams on the CD 2030. And so we want to align and keep with those strategic priorities, but what we are reviewing are the objectives under each of those. So as you know, in this process, we've been looking at the existing objectives and identifying them as measurable or not measurable. So the first objective under optimize community engagement is create district-wide consistency regarding rules, policies involving family, parent, and volunteer engagement. So measurable or not measurable?
Yeah, I think it's measurable, and I need to come up with some ways we can measure it.
Okay.
So,
You think measurable?
yes.
Does anybody disagree? Not disagree then, maybe have a different approach or different thought then? Everybody?
I don't know if it is measurable. But maybe I'm wrong, because of it's regarding rules and policies, which would mean we would have something to show our community that has been implemented.
Something.
What do you think?
So, when I read that, I thought, well, because I do think it's and I know that Dr. Eldridge has already addressed this, but that our teachers and our staff need a formal training on the rules and policies of the district. But I also think that can be measured, that they receive that training, and that time has been given to them during staff development week, where we go over those rules and policies, but then we all, that they have to sign that they receive that training and that they understand the rules and policies. But that would be one way to know that, yes, we're at 100% compliance or 90% compliance or whatnot.
I almost want to say that, well, it's more about reporting and volunteers. So I personally, and I don't know that this is measurable. And of course, by saying it's not measurable doesn't mean it's not important. And then this is one of our priorities that we've already talked about even to, tonight on that. Well, so if we were going to maintain that objective, does any, you mentioned training.
Training with the signature at the end of the, at the end of the training, but that would verify it, that, and it would be a policy standard that we would have the training and the signatures collected at the end from each campus. But then I also, if you're talking about policies involving family and parent volunteer engagement, the number of volunteers, like there's ways to measure these, but that's what we want to focus on.
Well, I think it's an indicator, and I think we need to look back at, I think we need to take it a step back and what is our desired outcome with, to reach, optimizing community engagement. So we know we want our parents involved.
Right.
We know we would like increased engagement from community members, maybe community members that might not have students, and I'm making an assumption, this is my own personal desires, y'all tell me if you think different. Just engagement from the community, right?
Right. Well, then I was thinking, even though we wanted to measure the engagement with businesses and community members, we could easily do that with the level of donations, the number of programs sponsored by outside businesses for our district and our kids. So there's lots of ways to do that if we want to focus on that. And of course, the focus should be increasing that every year to have more of the community engagement, more of the businesses and civic organizations involved in our campuses. If that's something that we feel is necessary that we track, there are ways to do so, if that's what we want to do.
So right now,
Things like PTA involvement, participation, campus improvement committee, and or moving up to district improvement and some of the other things like that.
I also think we have a lot of inconsistencies since we came back from COVID. Some campuses let parents come back in, some don't. Some can eat lunch only on Mondays or Fridays, some open them all. So we can write any kind of administrative regulations that here's what we require, at least to everybody, notifies us so we are consistent. Because there's some principals that just open their doors and they're happy that the parents come in, and there's some that it's still like, it may be 50-50. And so, but we have the ability to do that. We just have to be consistent in what we expect out of our administrators for that.
is that measurable?
Yeah, I don't think that's.
Yeah, I was like, is that
It
something that
goes
as a
with
board
the
we wanna
consistent, but it's not a measurable thing, but it goes also, I think, to engagement on our campuses with with parents.
Yeah, we could
Parents.
track that through Raptor.
Yeah,
Would it be like increased, like just going, an arrow going up, or yes?
Yeah, I know,
or
but that's what
checkable,
we'll
like,
have to.
I guess that's the question for me, is it something that we can actually track? Because what, Randy says, is it gonna go up or down? And that's the only way we would measure it, right? Increase or decrease?
but like with any goal, you've got to do your PLAP, which is your present level of performance,
Yes.
right? So where are we right now? And then we do our measurements from that point. So if that's something we want to track, I'm not saying, I'm just giving examples of how we can if we want to.
Yeah, and as a reminder, these are gonna be, you are taking, Marjorie's taking, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be able to remember.
Well, and I think in keeping with Dr. Eldridge's point is that not only are we measuring, but perhaps we come up with a defined set. These are the numbers, or these are the pieces of data that we're going to look at. It's not to say that there aren't some other things that could be used, but I'll just make it up. PTA involvement, that's a measurable, trackable thing. If that's one of the things we're going to look at, fine, at least put it out there. So if parents coming to eat, with their child during the week, that's something.
One of the things we changed this year was honoring our campus at our board meetings. So, because we know our campuses love competition. And when principals get to accept an award from PTA at the board meeting, it has been so meaningful, and that's been increasing the memberships because people want to be honored and recognized.
They want to win.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're gonna take these notes, there's no decisions, you know, or anything to that. The governance subcommittee will take the notes and then we'll do what we have done and kind of put it together. We'll document why or what and get it back out, and then we'll go. And just so y'all know, we're through the first strategic priority 1. That is with administration right now, and we're gonna have a meeting with them to finalize, make sure the language is very clear on what our expectations were and what our priorities were set, as well as, Randy, your point, review the specific data set that we would be looking at on all those things. So it's all, I don't know how many steps are in this, 5 on each priority, but that's what it's working for. Okay, so did you have something just from a non-measurable standpoint? Sustain intentional relationships with business, community, and civic organizations. So I think this feeds right back in right with the first one, right? And it might be a combination, or maybe I'll shut my mouth. Measurable or non-measurable?
Again, I think we can measure it if we feel like we need to measure it. If we feel like it's important and we want to set a goal, I feel like we can measure it. And again, donations, outside business sponsored activities and events.
Mentoring would be.
Because that is something that would be.
Mentoring.
We have it, and
Yeah.
we also have our legacy card that we gave to all of our retired, I mean, I've given those out so that they would be engaged, and we haven't tracked it, I mean, but we could come up with a way that, because they love coming to our musicals and our games, and that has been a game changer. They've, you know.
I guess it kind of depends on what we're gonna track, because are we thinking about money, are we thinking about meetings?
Involvement.
And that's just for me going out there.
I personally, it's the engagement for me, from businesses, organizations, families, and community members that might not have kids in the district. Because I think the more of those people across all of those that are involved and present in some way in our schools, as much as they're able, or as little as they're able, whatever it is, that exposes our children to so many more backgrounds, opportunities, you know, businesses, careers, you know, anything. So just having that interaction,
Well, it
I think
also
that's where.
keeps the community well-rounded and informed
Yeah.
on what's happening in the schools.
Yes, and what's in our campuses.
But you could also measure that by the amount of scholarships our seniors are receiving from outside entities. Because we're getting a lot more of those than we have in the past, where there's business people, places, civic organizations that maybe hadn't heard of before. They're giving our kids scholarships too.
And
So
grants to our schools.
But
That's
I mean,
that's a level of engagement with our kids, so.
I guess maybe we have different engagement thoughts. I was thinking about people and money. You're thinking about something different, right? Like money, but scholarship form.
Yeah, but that's engagement with our children. They come to they come to the ceremonies, they sit there, they listen, they give away their money. So that's a way of their engagement
So
with us.
would this like a one-day snapshot? Would this be a yearly thing?
We'd have to, we determine that after we figure out some of the minutes.
Again, if we feel like it's important, there are ways to measure it. That's what we want to do.
Okay, well, I think we all agree that optimizing community engagement is important. I mean, that is something. It's just the data. You know, we're tracking one thing within data to be able to see what it is.
Right, maybe. I mean, you could even go as far as like those the book vending machines. I mean, it's being given by a different organization. I mean, every
All the
school.
grants.
All the grants. I mean, there's so many ways that we could certainly measure that if we wanted.
Okay, kind of I'm gonna move on to strategic
Okay, so strategic priority 4, optimize social and emotional health of all students. So objective 1, district will develop and implement professional learning for all educators on social and emotional learning. Measurable or not measurable?
Yes.
I
PD,
would,
right? Professional development.
but it's the implement part, that's the hard part. So if you're gonna measure it, you're gonna have to have a curriculum, you're gonna have to have a schedule when that curriculum's being implemented, and you have to have some way to assess it. Is it working, are we using it? So I think.
So like at secondary, they get that during advisory period,
Yes, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
but it's only on certain days.
Yes, pick the Monday.
But it's mandatory.
So they do get it, I don't know, are we assessing any part of, I don't even know. So I'm just saying, that might be a little more involved, we talk about the implementation of that versus the training we receive.
Well, and so let me take that back step again. You know, the district will develop and implement professional learning for all educators on social and emotional learning. And the reason, let's talk about why we feel that's important or should still be there. I mean, we want our educators to be aware of things happening or how to recognize in the classroom, right? At a high level, what's going on to ensure our students, you know, are there.
And safety.
And safety, yeah, absolutely. Recognize, you know, signs, making sure people are secure, comfortable, right? And so that's the signs. So I think it's measurable from a development, but I also think implementing is that just who's taking it? But then what's the result of this training?
Because what's the,
What
why
are we
bother
getting
if we're not
out of
getting the
this
result?
training? Yeah, that
Yeah.
outcome.
The outcome, that's what we're here
Can you measure
for.
the outcome?
Can you measure, I mean, some of those outcomes I don't wanna measure, you know, but.
Yeah.
I just think if you put the implement part in there, which is the important part, I mean,
Well, and like we've done on others, this could be just a strike and implement. You know, maybe it's just that we're maintaining that training, you know, and that's where it is. Because then the outcome of teachers in the classroom being aware, monitoring, watching should come with the training, right?
right? But I think you might have elementaries that are doing a social skills lesson or a social emotional lesson on Mondays at 2 o'clock. We just don't know if if the implementation's actually happening on all our campuses.
Okay.
Could you measure implementation?
I mean, we have certain things like our threat assessments that we use when kids are, you know, having some difficulties. And I mean, I think it's hard to measure because you never,
It's not the same thing.
It's not finite.
It's not like data, it's more like,
Well, the problem is the outcome.
Uh,
I mean, how are you measuring that outcome? You can measure anything as far as implementing. You can check that one.
Check it off.
Yeah, here's the
But
list
it's
of
the
the training.
outcome.
and it's also, so,
What's the other thing that survey they
it's
say?
kind of, I mean, we have so many wonderful teachers that'll be like, Carolyn, are you okay today? And then how would you measure that? I mean, we've trained the teachers to look, and our teachers are just, they love our kids, right? And it's their family, but how do you measure the differences of maybe they called home, or maybe they wrote you a nice note, or, you know, maybe they got you some, I don't know how to measure all the things that our teachers do for kids in that degree.
Well,
I mean, we do the training. We have lots of training. We have wonderful counselors. I guess you have to think about which one you want to look at.
Yeah, classic example happened in our family, and my brother-in-law passed away, and the way Ruth was supported by colleagues and staff and in many different ways, I think is an example of how this family functions.
But it'd be very difficult to measure.
yeah.
Success.
I mean, we have so many great organizations that we had somebody yesterday bring us I think there's over 100 backpacks in Katrina's office, because we're like, we always get backpacks at the beginning of the year, but you know, some kids are harder on things than others. They may need a new backpack, so we get all of that. Our faith-based leadership group met today, and they ask what our needs are, and they reach out to families and take care of them. I don't know how to measure exactly all the things that we have put in place.
But it's been developed, right?
Mhm.
It just,
They go to training, so if that's what we want, to check mark, I mean, that's,
But as a district too, we do a lot of,
maybe we reassess, will develop and implement.
Yeah, we'll take that and come up. So, the second objective, number 2.
really focusing on just on that, the healthy
But that starts
relationships.
this year, next year.
but we could also look at, you know, one of the things we also have is our behavior specialists that teach teachers how to teach kids to self-regulate, and you can pull discipline data for every campus, and it has been amazing to see the discipline of our students. The behaviors that we used to see, you know, right when they came back from COVID, no matter what district you're in, it was certain behaviors. And now that, you know, we've got these specialist teaching teachers, or you may be a new teacher, and I need to tell you not to yell at kids, but it has made a difference, you know, because now we can tell you that here's how you handle that, you just go take his pencil away. But, you know, the behaviors of students that we are able to get focused has been amazing. But again, everybody you can have a program, but every campus implements it slightly different. So when you're measuring it, you're not measuring,
The same across the board.
I mean, we can train you, but you may be a natural at it, and you may need a retrain, but we can see the evidence in different ways.
So if we were determined that this was measurable, I mean, we know we've got new curriculum, I mean, you know, that's discipline data, but is it consistent? You know, consistent practices across, so maybe that's the goal,
Right.
Like she was talking about, that fidelity across.
Yeah.
Whatever, starting first grade, running up through.
Yeah, right. I mean, so discipline might be an indicator, counselor visits might be an indicator.
I was thinking of crisis counselor, something to do with them too.
Elementary level regular counselors, but you're right.
But then you have to make sure that it's clear across every campus, like, here's our referral process, and here's how you track that. I mean, we track the how many lessons they do, but it would be, you'd have to track kids.
Some more paperwork.
Well, yeah,
And I don't want to add work to track something that we're going to get anyway with implementing a curriculum or something like that. I mean, the last thing we want to do is add to teachers' plates.
Right.
I mean, no go.
yeah, so let's just mark that out.
I think
it's too
our
late.
We've already
counselors
got
do a
the
great
curriculum.
job.
We've got the curriculum, let's check and let them measure how that's going.
Yeah, that's, you get that one.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
track to it.
Let's
Let's track, I like that.
Okay, so that's strategic priority 3 and 4. If you think of something that, you know, as you're thinking through these, just send an individual message to me and I'll get it. I'll add it to our notes with the governance subcommittee. Like I said, strategic priority 1 is with administration reviewing. I didn't get any comments on strategic priority 2, so window is closed. It's going to administration based on our schedule. And then we've changed it a couple of times, but I think we'll be talking about strategic priority 5 on a work study in late March sure, maybe early April. I'll have to look at the calendar again, but I'll let y'all know for
So,
what it is.
okay, so before we're taking out, or you're gonna keep it? We don't know.
Or part two.
We already did.
I know, I'm saying, are you keeping it,
Oh,
or what was the verdict?
We'll let you know. We're
Okay.
gonna do our work. We'll
Okay.
do our work and then
It'll
we'll
come
come
back.
back with a proposal.
So no, she just said we're doing 5 for the next one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
5 is the next, but,
We'll sign all the mishap, because she's not doing
Yeah,
a
That's
good
right.
job.
exactly.
And she's listening, it's all you guys.
Okay, all good?
Good,
Yes, thank you.
That, it's committee effort. Committee effort. Thank you, committee.
Thank you.
Our last item on the agenda is a legislative discussion, and it starts with Ross. On deck.
So, I only have, one update right now, and that's possibly us going to the Capitol on April 1st. And it would be just a drive down there, get up early in the morning, and then drive back the same day. Our intention is just to go as a board, hopefully together as a board, and just go down to Austin, talk to a couple of representatives. Matthew Hall, Raise Your Hand Texas, is going to facilitate that meeting for us. And yesterday, we were at Team CFB, and there was a conversation from a principal who came up to me and asked if they could come with us, and they asked, are we gonna open it to principals to come? So I mentioned it to Matthew Hall, and he said, it's really interesting because principals have young staff members in Austin, and they have these principals who still see them, the staffers see them as authority figures, so they really trust them, they really respect them, and whatever they say is very important to them. And so he's like, if you can, I would recommend it. There's been a district, a surrounding district in that area that did that and did the same thing. They carpooled, and everybody went down to Austin, and then they came back. So I'm bringing this to you guys to ask your thoughts. What do you think we should do? You guys let me know.
I think that's great. I think if we could open it to principals, that would be fantastic.
I think we'll ultimately want to have a discussion with Ms. Marsh and Dr. Eldridge to say how many principals, if any, might we be able
We'll
to
take all 30.
afford to release
Can't take
at
all.
any one day, 'cause I'm not sure we want them to all be gone. But I think it is a good idea, and if we can work out some logistics on that, to bring that forward for the discussion and planning for the April trip.
Okay.
And transportation.
Yeah, I'll work on
And I'll have once we get closer to the date, we'll have an organized day, time, hour, what are we gonna do, where are we going, who are we gonna meet with. Matthew's gonna get it all ready, and he's been such a great asset to us, so I really appreciate.
Thank you for bringing Matthew to
He's been great.
Well, I think the principals and all the department leaders loved his teaching yesterday, because
Yeah, he was great.
oftentimes we don't understand what our legislator's doing, and he is a great teacher.
Yes.
Um,
He's
And
a great
that has
speaker,
been
so.
that's been some really good feedback too, that a lot of our principals have said, I didn't understand that, or I didn't know. And so thank you for bringing it to light as a committee. Thank you guys as a district for just showing us, because we had no idea. 6160, what? If you come every day. I mean, to some people, it's kind of a surprise.
It's the funding, it's, what bills are passing, how they pass them, I mean, just all the basics, and he is a very good teacher, so.
So that's all I have on that.
So we'll come up with a process of, it's also you want the people to go that want to advocate, that really feel the passion and the opportunity, and then what transportation's available.
And then if y'all will tell me, or RSVP, and say who's gonna go.
We did, I think it's
Okay.
a D.
I hope everybody.
That's April. I'm unfortunately presenting a 2026 business plan in New York. So I
In New
won't
York.
be-
Pretty important.
I'll be there. That's the pain,
Look
so.
at the date.
Unfortunately, I'll send a strongly worded email though.
That's fair. It's
Yeah.
April 1st, and it's on Monday, because we have a board meeting on Thursday.
I'll put it on the calendar, send
Yes.
y'all all an invite, and you can RSVP.
Thank you,
I
guys.
will look and see. I have a meeting, doctor's appointment next week with a neurosurgeon, and there's several things up in the air, and so depending upon what and how and when, I may not be traveling to some place like Austin. We'll just have to see. I
We
fully
understand.
support him, and hopefully we'll be
The meeting yesterday, but we also have a website, so anybody can access it.
Final thing I have before we dismiss is an announcement, really. There's been a group within the staff that is working on, that time of year already, planning and prepping for graduations and all the various pieces that go along with that. One of the things that is being looked at to develop uniformity and consistency is for everyone involved to wear a graduation robe. And that would include board members who have not in the past traditionally done that. They would wear, we would wear, just simple the black robe and then a color band that is appropriate to the, that's not really a hood, but whatever it is that, so if it was the Turner graduation, it would be blue. Smith, it would be green, red for Creek View, teal for French View, and so that would be there. I've thrown it out as an idea. I kind of like the idea, think it might be a nice change to kind of unify some of that and get a little more consistency there. Would also solve me having to go out and get my suit cleaned. But I will report back to them, may I report back to them that we are willing to try the idea for a year.
Sure.
Yes,
Fine with me.
me too.
Okay, and they're gonna use,
You just don't want to put that count on, but we'll all try for you.
I've never been in favor of it, but that's
Yeah.
my personal, but if the majority of the board, I'm perfectly willing to try it for,
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Let's try it this year.
let's try it this year and see what happens
What
with
would
it.
be level up a professional?
Jostens is
Well,
the
Carolyn, I hope
provider
my
for all of the high
Of course, I'm
schools.
saying we're all in the same. Okay.
And so Jostens has said they will provide the appropriate black robes and the colored scarves, whatever that's called, that would be appropriate for that. And I will report that back up to Shane to everybody. Are there any other comments? If not, what time is it? At 8:09, I'm going to gavel this meeting closed.